One of the most important ways that you can set up your personal brand is by pegging yourself to people that already have large crowds. And I showed you how SparkToro is one way that you can do that. Someone who was very successful at doing this is Jordan Peterson, whose popularity skyrocketed over a period of about 1 year. And one of the main reasons that this happened was because Jordan Peterson was a guest speaker on podcasts that were already famous for people like Joe Rogan. So that would be one of the simplest ways that you can develop your personal brand, is simply solicit people that already have podcasts that cater to the same audience that you want, or at least that there's some overlap between their audience and the one that you want, your desirable audience. And instead of trying to build your own email list or build your own following from scratch, which is a very slow, tedious uphill battle, you simply piggyback off of people that already have giant followings. And podcasts is one of the simplest ways to do that. And we can see Jordan Peterson has become an international sensation, largely because of these guest podcast events that he had. Now, there are other key lessons we can learn from Jordan Peterson, whether you like him or not. And one of those is highlighted by Mr. Pfeffer again, which is that people that are successful and become leaders, which is indeed is what your personal brand is fundamentally going to become, whether you're an influencer or a CEO, whatever your aspirations are, these people are able to tolerate conflict. Now, if you think about it, a CEO is going to be presented with all sorts of controversy and is going to have to make some very tough decisions. And those decisions are going to offend a lot of people. But that's what's required to get the job done. As you become famous as an influencer, you're also going to face conflict. Some people receive death threats. There are people that are going to disagree with what you're saying. Now, one of the important things I'm going to highlight later is that one of the other key ingredients of becoming famous or developing your personal brand is having a strong point of view. And the problem with having a strong point of view is that you're opening yourself up to opposition. Now, if we go back to the Jordan Peterson example, one of the ways that he became famous was he was on a news show with a journalist, and there was an argument about the gender pay gap. So it was a very controversial stance that Jordan Peterson was taking. It was a very conflict-laden situation. And your ability to withstand that conflict and not quiver and become anxious in those experiences is one of the ways that you're going to be able to develop your personal brand. So develop a thick skin. Another key thing that Pfeffer points out is having high energy levels. So people that are successful and have strong personal brands are often associated with strong energy. So for example, we look at PewDiePie. So PewDiePie is, last I checked, he was the second most influential YouTuber. I don't know if that's still the situation, but anyways, he was one of the biggest influencers in the YouTube space. And he had reviewed a product that I was managing, and it immediately got around 15 million views. And one of the reasons I think PewDiePie is very successful is because he's a high energy person. People like that. They like energy. They like enthusiasm. They like people that aren't draining them, but are empowering them, that are energizing them. Almost like a battery or an energy source. So developing your personal brand, I would think about how you can raise your enthusiasm by doing things like meditation, body work, exercise, breathing exercises, yoga, these types of things that make you radiate energy rather than being kind of this depressing person that nobody wants to follow. Another thing that Pfeffer points out is that status matters more than where the status came from. Now, I mentioned earlier that you want to associate with people that are well-known brand names using tools like SparkToro and finding those influencers. So there's a case where you're leveraging people who have big brand names. I also think it's important to peg yourself to brand names such as having like an AWS certification, for example, if you want to develop a personal brand as a database developer or something like that. If you have experience working for large Fortune 500 companies, for example, you worked at Apple or Facebook, you should definitely associate with those brands. But one thing that Pfeffer is pointing out here is that although those things may be important, like the source of your status, the actual position that you held might be more important. So having a title like Chief Marketing Officer or Chief Architect, President, Vice President. He's saying that his research suggests that these are actually more important because what happens is status is transferable. So even if you had a very prestigious position at a low status company, so a company perhaps that isn't famous, if you do go somewhere else, maybe on a guest blog, a podcast, or to work for another company, that status transfers, even though the underlying brand may not have as much credibility. That's an interesting rule. It's something you want to think about when you're looking at positions and title names. Another thing, and this is something people cringe at, is being a self-promoter. To some extent, this is the unfortunate truth about how people develop personal brands, is they often brag and point out how they were successful. So people on LinkedIn, for example, are going to post, I was just ranked the #1 bestseller on Amazon, or I was just recognized by a news channel. All about me, me, me. And I don't want you to compromise your ethics and do things that you don't want to do. I mean, I kind of cringe doing this, but there was an example recently where I wanted to celebrate an achievement, which was getting 100,000 students. So I made this post on LinkedIn, and it got almost 3,000 views, maybe 3,000 views as of now that I'm writing. 61 reactions, 16 comments. So pretty successful as a post that I didn't promote or, add a whole lot of hashtags on. I just had one little hashtag. But this is the kind of self-promotion that builds up your personal brand. Now, don't take it too far. Don't come across as too selfish, but occasionally celebrate your own successes, because one of the lessons I learned was I often appreciated people that talked about their success because I learned from it and I found it inspiring. And I know people that were very successful at achieving things, but they would be very private about it. And it actually kind of turned me off, because if you're very private, it's almost like you're protecting it and you don't want anybody else to know the secret sauce. But when you start talking about your successes in a genuine way, not in a I'm fabricating my own success, but in an honest and open way, you're showing other people that it's possible, that another person from that small town, just like me, can really achieve great things. And that's very inspiring. And inspiration is one of the things that can help you go viral and can help you actually change people's lives. And that's the kind of personal brand that a lot of you probably want to have.